Welcome back to the Project B-Ball podcast. My name is Harsh Patel, and another week of the NFL has passed by. During this week, we had some great games between some elite opponents, and it all started off with our Thursday night football game between the Miami Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Dolphins beat the Jaguars with a score of 31-13, being led by their quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. With this win, the Dolphins erased the 0 in the win column, and Fitzpatrick actually became the first quarterback in NFL history to beat a team 6 times on 6 different teams. The journeyman quarterback threw for 160 yards and 2 touchdown passes. As in for the Jacksonville Jaguars, their star player was Jackson Robinson, their running back, who had 2 rushing touchdowns and also added in 6 receptions for 83 yards. Fantasy owners, if you're looking for a running back, I suggest you pick him up because he's looking like a stud. Our first Sunday game, we had the Chicago Bears versus the Atlanta Falcons, and the Falcons collapsed again. They jumped out to a 26-10 lead at the end of the third quarter, but in the fourth, Nick Foles threw for 3 touchdown passes, ultimately giving them the win by a score of 30-26. What's funny was that during this game, the Bears actually sat down their starting quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky. And as soon as Nick Foles came into the game, he was just a difference maker and led the comeback. I think that the Bears are going to keep Nick Foles as their starting quarterback for the rest of the year unless some injury happens. And Mitchell Trubisky, I think, will just be sitting on the bench, or he might just find another team. Our next game, we had the LA Rams against the Buffalo Bills. Unlike the other game where the Bears completed the comeback, the Rams almost completed the comeback, but Josh Allen threw for a 3-yard pass to Tyler Kroft with 15 seconds left, giving them the win, 35-32. Josh Allen had a great game again, throwing for 4 touchdown passes and 311 yards. The Bills are now 3-0, while the Rams are 2-1. The next game was between the Washington football team and the Cleveland Browns. Not much to be said here other than Nick Chubb, who had a great game with another 100-plus rushing yard game and 2 touchdown passes. The Browns beat the Redskins by a score of 34-20, and actually, this is the first time in over 2 years, I think, that the Browns are over 500 in the season. The next game was between the Tennessee Titans and the Minnesota Vikings. The Titans, this was actually a back and forth game, but the Titans ultimately pulled through with the victory of 31-30 against the Vikings. Believe it or not, the star player was actually their kicker for the Titans, Stephen Gostkowski, who made a career-high 6 field goal kicks, and which included a 55-yarder with a minute left in the game. With this win, the Titans are still undefeated with a record of 3-0, while the Vikings are without a win, and now they are 0-3 in the season. The Raiders and Patriots game was next, and Cam Newton just came in through and just gave them the victory. Not much to be said here other than that Derek Carr really didn't get it going during the game, and he ultimately lost by a score of 36-20. Our next game was the San Francisco 49ers and the New York Giants. The 49ers destroyed the Giants by a score of 36-9, with their backup quarterback Nick Mullins actually having a great game, throwing for 343 yards and a touchdown pass, while the Giants' young quarterback Daniel Jones only threw for 179 yards and a pick. From the get-go, it was all 49ers. And I believe that the Niners are still going to have Nick Mullins as their quarterback for next week, because I think they want to give Garoppolo as much rest as he can. With all the injuries on this team, no one knows what's going to happen. The next game was between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Philadelphia Eagles, and this actually resulted in a tie. Carson Wentz had another bad game, in my opinion. He only threw for 225 yards and 2 picks. Why I say this was a bad game for him, because he had many opportunities in the overtime to lead a victory against the Bengals, but he just couldn't get it done. He couldn't get a first down at all in the overtime, which ultimately resulted in a tie between these two teams. As in for Cincinnati, Joe Burrow had a great game, who had 312 yards, while 125 yards of those came to Tyler Boyd, who had 10 receptions to go along with it. The next game was actually between the Houston Texans and the Pittsburgh Steelers. With this victory, the Steelers are 3-0, while the Texans are now 0-3. Deshaun Watson does not look like himself. This might be because of the reason of DeAndre Hopkins is leaving, or there might be something wrong with him because he is not having a great season. He only threw for 264 yards with 2 touchdown passes and an interception, while Ben Roethlisberger, he didn't have a great game, but he managed to get the victory for the Steelers. The next game, we had the New York Jets versus the Indianapolis Colts. Not much to be said here. The Colts just routed the Jets. I think that the Jets might be wanting a new quarterback because Sam Darnold is not producing. He threw for 3 picks during this game, and they might be tanking for Trevor Lawrence next year. Who knows? The Carolina Panthers and Chargers were the afternoon games, and the Panthers actually got off in the victory books as they won 21-16 against the Chargers. Justin Herbert had a decent game for his second career NFL start. He threw for 330 yards and a touchdown and a pick. His main receiver was Keenan Allen with 132 yards and 13 receptions. But for Carolina, they got their first victory as Teddy Bridgewater had 235 yards and a touchdown. The next game, we had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Denver Broncos. Tom Brady just did Tom Brady things, and he beat the Broncos by a score of 28-10. Now, this was a shocker to me that the Detroit Lions actually beat the Arizona Cardinals 26-23. I always knew that Matthew Stafford was a great quarterback, but looking at how the Cardinals were playing in the past 2 games, I really thought that they were going to have a great season and they were going to beat the Detroit Lions easily. But unfortunately for them, their quarterback, Kyler Murray, had 3 interceptions in this game to go along with his 2 touchdown passes. But you can never have more interceptions than touchdowns in a game. Otherwise, you should lose. His star wide receiver, actually, DeAndre Hopkins, had 137 yards on 10 receptions. But the main story of the game was when Matt Prater kicked a 39-yard field goal to win the game at the buzzer. The Lions beat the Cardinals by a score of 26-23. The Cardinals dropped to a record of 2-1, while the Lions are now 1-2. Next game, we had a classic between the Dallas Cowboys and the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson is continuing his MVP season, throwing for 5 touchdown passes to go along with his 315 yards. This was like a back and forth game, I would say, as Seattle jumped out to a 9-3 lead, but the Dallas Cowboys scored a touchdown, so the scores were 9-9. And as this game progressed, it was just going back and forth until Seattle pulled away in the third quarter by a score of 30-15. Dallas managed to make a comeback as they actually were leading with 4 minutes left to go in the game by a score of 31-30. But Russell Wilson, being as great as he is, threw for a 29-yard pass to DK Metcalf that ultimately gave them the win, 38-31. Our Sunday night football game was the Green Bay Packers versus the New Orleans Saints. I really do think that without Michael Thomas, the Saints are not that great of a team, as their main wide receiver was actually their running back Alvin Kamara, who had 139 yards in the air to go along with his 2 touchdown passes. But the story of the game was actually Aaron Rodgers and Lazard, who combined for 146 yards and a touchdown. And our last game of the week, we had the Kansas City Chiefs with Super Bowl MVP Patrick Mahomes against Baltimore Ravens with the league MVP from last year, Lamar Jackson. People were saying that the Ravens were actually going to win this game, but Mahomes quickly got out to a quick lead and never looked back as they beat the Ravens 34-20. Lamar Jackson didn't look like himself as he threw actually for under 100 yards. He only threw for 97, but he did run for 83 yards. Kansas City is now 3-0 in the season, while Baltimore is 2-1. We'll see how Baltimore goes on from here, because the only thing I can see is that Lamar Jackson does not perform against the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, whenever he goes against them, he just does not perform well. So we'll see that in the playoffs maybe. We'll see that maybe he can get it going against the Chiefs. It will be a great game next time. But that's all for this week. I will catch you guys for week 4. Leave any comments about who you think is going to win in week 4, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.